welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. I am tired. Now, I finished a 6-episode docu-series on Disney Plus that, unlike Imagineering's story, which was similarly a huge multi-part thing, it got, what's it called? This got, what's we're looking for here? This was dumped all at once, binge style, instead of put out one each week, and so on and so on, until the whole thing was released at the end. And for the sake of the fact that I'm homesick until I go back to work Tuesday with COVID, this was fine. However, in any other situation, this would not be fine. The documentary, as the title will suggest, it's Light and Magic, the documentary series about ILM, the groundbreaking, visual effects department of Lucasfilm, founded by George Lucas and John Dykstra in the 1970s to do the effects on Star Wars and then a bunch of other movies. Now the series is corporate propaganda. Let's not kid ourselves. It's very much Disney making a documentary about how great a Disney subsidiary is and how much that Disney subsidiary has impacted the industry. And I was thinking about this while I was watching it, and we look at there's this great book, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, about the new wave of directors that came up in the early 70s. George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, all these people who are legends now, and how they got their start and how they reshaped Hollywood when they came around. And I was like, why hasn't that? As I'm watching, I'm like, well, that would be a much more interesting story, in my opinion, than telling the story of specifically what George Lucas is doing. Or like, if you go over to Paramount Plus, they have The Offer, which was a series about The Godfather being made by Francis Ford Coppola. And it's like, why don't they do a series about all of them? And I was thinking about it while I was watching, especially in the first few episodes when they talk about Lucas's early career, before Star Wars, and how he went to film school and made that short THX 1138, and then they made it into a feature at Warner Brothers, and then Lucas left Warner Brothers after Warner Brothers cut 5 minutes from the movie to help it at release. And it's one of those things where you watch it and it's like, okay, this is very much designed to not make Warner Brothers look great. And it also makes the issue that happened with what's his name in recent history, Christopher Nolan in recent history, look about the same, where it's like, there was an argument, and then they left the studio, and they recovered, they were fine, and all of that, so it's not the end of the world. And when you watch this documentary, and you watch, all of that, it's like, look, no studio is going to make that movie or that miniseries, because no studio comes out of this looking great, and no studio comes out of it looking like they did the right thing the entire way through, because everyone looks stupid at some point, with the benefit of hindsight. Like Warner Brothers letting Coppola go, and then him going and directing Patton at Fox, and then The Godfather at Paramount, his next two movies, is a colossal fuck-up of epic proportions. And the same goes for Warner Brothers, not wanting to work with Lucas, and then him going off and making American Graffiti, and then Star Wars, and it's like it doesn't make them look good, so they're not going to make the movie because it makes them look dumb. Meanwhile, on the other side of it, who's going to consent to look dumb in a movie? Like, it's just a situation that's not going to happen. But this documentary kind of, and again, because it's Disney making it, the perspective is Lucas was 100% in the wrong, or was in the right, and then look what happened, and it all worked out, and Warner Brothers looks bad, and it's like, well, alright, whatever. And in the same way that, like, when you watch the Imagineering story, you didn't go, like the Imagineering story doesn't talk about the stranglehold that the Walt Disney Company has on the politics of Anaheim, or the fact that, you know, the phrase Reedy Creek Improvement District is not said once in the Imagineering story. And because it's not exactly the best optic in this day and age, they're trying to make you look at what they've done and be like, look at all the changes we made. And I think one of the other things that, for me at least, really, you know, hurt this documentary was the fact that it kind of stopped in 1993, and then it stopped, and it didn't really talk about the impact on the next crop of filmmakers, and how that worked from there. Like, they briefly touch on the creation of Photoshop. They briefly touch on the arrival of the digital nonlinear editor, but these things were colossal game changers for filmmaking and opening up and demystifying the process for a new generation. Like, this is a huge deal that got kind of glossed over because it's not as important as, say, you know, look at these cool effects shots from these movies that you know, like The Abyss or, you know, Terminator 2, and look, it's cool to see that, but there's a reason why those things are highlighted, and it's, you know, to make these people look good. Like, I think Cameron is a huge part of this, and they talk about Cameron a lot in this. And honestly, I'm surprised they don't go all the way to the 2000s, because ILM also did Avatar. Like, I'm surprised they don't go all the way to that, because Avatar, like, blew the doors off of what could be done with motion capture. And you know, that was a groundbreaking movie of its time. And still, it's like, you go back and watch Avatar now, it still holds up pretty well. The problem is, like, you know, I mean, the story great, no, but I mean, it's a visual effects bonanza. It's like they're showing clips from Terminator 2, which was 1991, and it still looks great. You go back and watch Jurassic Park, which was, you know, there's these fully digital renderings of dinosaurs for the first time on film, and it looks great. And it's like, it's things like that are addressed, but then, like, more recent things are not. Like, you know, like stagecraft isn't touched on at all, and it's like, that is probably the biggest, you know, filmmaking innovation of recent history that's being used on a broad scale. And it's, you know, it's called The Volume. It's this giant soundstage with a camera that can orient to, you know, with a screen that orients to the camera. Like, it's groundbreaking technology. Like, and fact of the matter is, that's not touched on because it kind of ends with Jurassic Park. And look, maybe they're going to do a season 2. Like, maybe that's why. Because season 1 spends a lot of time in the 80s and talking about Poltergeist and talking about, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark and talking about Star Wars and talking about all this other stuff. But, you know, and then we get to the early 90s. Maybe they're going to do another season where they're going to be like, okay, and then here's what's happened since. But I feel like that was a missed opportunity. And especially the whole thing about them not addressing the impact that has been had when they made things more affordable and easier to understand. That if we're going to talk about trailblazing, that's an important part of it. Because it's one thing to come out and create a new technology, but it's another thing entirely to take that new technology and make it accessible and make it easy to learn for anyone who is trying to break into the industry. Because that's the definition of a trailblazer. It's you're opening the door but not slamming the door shut behind you and inhibiting it behind cost and inhibiting it behind, you know, a level of technical know-how that most people don't have. There's also the whole ratatouille, like, anyone can cook kind of approach that's kind of used through the entire thing. I appreciate that too. Where it's like they talk about people coming from all walks of life and then coming in and being like, no, we're going to do it this way. And it's one of those things where it's like if you want to make a movie, or if you have aspirations of being a filmmaker in any way, this is a documentary you should watch, because it's like these are all people who had to build from the ground up the technology they had to do, and they show old home movies that these people made, who worked for ILM before they were, working on when they were kids, and how they did these effects on their own. But in the same way that like Eli Roth has that series on AMC and on Shudder about the history of horror, I'd like to see something more about the history of visual effects, not even specifically about ILM. I mean, ILM's a huge part of it, because we would not have the movies that we have today without ILM doing what they did at that time. But I think that having a full and deep explanation of what everything is, how everything works, and all of that, demystifying the process would be cool. And you know what I was thinking too while I was watching this, and then I also watched a series about the differences in the various Harry Potter games in the early 2000s. And I was thinking, like, when we have video games, like, things will go out of and into vogue, like pixel art and 16-bit and that kind of thing, where it's like an homage to an old art style. We don't see that too much in movies. I think the most recent one was Kung Fury, which was kind of like an 80s homage. But I'm talking in terms of effects. We don't really see new movies go back and recreate these old effects. And look, maybe it looks silly, maybe it's like because of how we've trained ourselves as viewers, it wouldn't work as well, but I'd like to see someone try. That'd be pretty cool, I think. And it's like, look, there's a reason, like, we can't go back and make a new Superman movie that looks like Superman 78, but I think that doing, like, a movie that's like a King Kong from that era, or like Godzilla from the 50s could be an interesting kind of approach. No, but it's like, I feel like this is a very well-made documentary. It's very interesting, and they got a lot of interviews and things like that, and it's like, hearing Cameron talk about, seeing Star Wars in 1977 and then being like, I'm changing careers because I'm going to make a movie. It's one of those things where it's like, it humanizes him in a weird way, because like there's a quote that was fake that went around. It's like, people say I'm the best director of all time, and they're wrong. I'm the best person of all time. I'm God-given human form. And he does have a certain arrogance to him, but there is something humbling about that I really enjoyed. And it's like, these are all people who saw the same movie that we all did. I mean, granted, I was born in the 90s, so the version of Star Wars that I saw was not the same version of Star Wars that, say, my dad saw in 1977. But it is it's still, fundamentally the same movie. People went in, saw it, and they were like, we're going to go and we're going to do this ourselves now. And it really is a great, moment of inspiration. And I do wonder, it's one of those things, I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks about this, but like when I go to the movies, I sit there and I think, like, who's going to see, like, is someone going to see this movie and watch it all the way through and then be like, I'm going to be that, I'm going to do that? Like, I remember as a kid, we had VHSs when I was young, and we had a VHS anniversary edition of The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and we also had Peter Pan. And both of these had documentaries on them about the making of these things, and it really just captured my imagination as a little kid. Like, these things were like how they went into making these, and how like I like the whole process of rotoscoping was kind of laid out in this documentary, where they had an actress come in and play Tinkerbell and act out the scenes, and then they drew her, and it's like, that is, that became motion capture, where just instead of a computer, it's a person drawing. It's a tremendous thing that and anyone who has an interest in visual effects should watch this documentary. It's very worth your time. But on that note, we'll wrap up there for today. I think we've covered enough ground on ILM. It's on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. Very interesting, especially if you're into the history of Hollywood and all of that. So today I'm going to try and marathon my way through Paper Girls, or as far as I can for Paper Girls, and then, we'll go on to something else after that, and I'll have a review up tomorrow, hopefully. But until then, have a great rest of your week.